Okay, Module 2, Lecture 4. Right now we're going to start talking about more of the concrete things that you can create with these Word and Google Docs tools. So this is probably going to be information that you might find is more useful than Module 1. So hopefully you'll take a lot away from this. We are focusing now on making the most out of what we have, making the most out of these resources. There's a lot in there. I'm sure when you open Word, there's tons there that you never actually touch at all. And so some of that maybe you don't need it, but some of it is actually really useful and will make your life easier. So we're going to go over some of those really foundational things that will just help you in all of your work. And so right now, our learning objective that we're focusing on is applying styles and heading levels to structure our documents. And so you know what those words mean for sure, generally. You might not be familiar with them as specific things in Word or in Google Docs yet. And so by the end of this, you will be. So, starting out, what are styles? And so you can go through a document and bold things or underline them or whatever and do it all individually, or you can use these styles. And so they are predefined kind of sets of identity structures, just style of different fonts, sizes, whatever it might be. And so you can select a piece of text. Generally, in a document, it would all be formatted as like normal text, but you can go through and select a title style. And so that'll bold it and generally make it in the center of the page. You can use headings. And when you do that, when you label a piece of text with a certain kind of style, when you edit it one time in the styles pane, it's going to edit for all of those things that have that attribute applied to it. So if you decide that you're going to do something in one font and then decide you want to change it later, it goes automatically. And so it saves you so much time. You don't have to go through the entire paper and change everything one by one. It'll just all go automatically for you. And it makes it easier too to like try out different styles or different fonts if you're not sure if it's the right choice for what you want to do. So they really do make things a lot easier once you get into the hang of using them, and just kind of make it a habit. A lot of this class is about making things habits. So if you can use styles as a habit, it's going to make it easier for you to format documents and just kind of change the presentation of them. And these headings, particularly, will also feed into the other sorts of things that Word can create for you automatically. And so, most importantly, that would be something like a table of contents or a table of figures. If you have things using heading 1, heading 2, so all these different levels, those will all show up in the right kind of format in your table of contents. And so instead of you having to go through and manually say, okay, this is on page 1, this is on page 3, and you have to do that yourself, Word will do it for you. So Word and Google Docs can both do that. I'm going to get into some more details about the differences between them a little bit later on in this lecture, but basically you should know that Word is more sophisticated. It can do a lot more than Google Docs. Google Docs kind of has the essentials that you need to have a decently structured document there, but there's options, just like the quantity of styles is lower in Google Docs versus Word. And so here's some screenshots to actually show you what those styles look like. So you might have to kind of pause this and zoom in. But in Word, you have the styles pane that's on the ribbon across the top of the document when you have it open. So you can see here normal text, like all of those go through. They're kind of similar. You can see the other column, what's in Google Docs, but that is hidden a little bit more. It's not as obvious, so you're not constantly looking at it when you're working on a Google Doc. So it's one of those things, again, where Word just offers a little bit more. But Google Docs generally offers the essentials. And so you can see there's still normal text, there's titles, there's headings. You can go several layers down. And if you navigated over to this, you can kind of make edits to those as you wish. So that's just kind of a general view into it, just to get you familiar with what I'm talking about when I say styles. And so why do they matter? For all the reasons I've already mentioned about just making life easier. But it also, there's something with doing things manually that can cause frustration, in my experience at least. If you go through and do it all yourself, you're doing kind of repetitive actions that you don't need to do. So a lot of times people will get themselves into situations where they're causing more stress than they necessarily needed. So if you can get in the habit of using the styles, you're going to eliminate that a lot of times. It also helps with organization and having that hierarchy. And so there are default settings or styles for each of your heading levels. And so you can set them. You might know that in different referencing styles. Like APA has a particular heading style that they want you to have throughout a document. Same for MLA, all of the kind of traditional ones. And so you can set your processor up to work in that kind of standard format, which when you have to do a dissertation, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to format that properly and be within like the confines of what APA expects and so on. Styles will also connect to things like accessibility tools. So, accessibility readers, all these different things that we have, the different technology can actually read headings. And so it'll know, okay, this is a marker, this is an important opening to something. And then if it goes into normal text, it knows, okay, this is the body of the paper. And so when there's different things coming in to try to make things more accessible to different audiences or wider audiences, using the headings as a default just makes that so much easier. So if you think about this when you're in the workplace, you will definitely always need to make sure that your documents, anything you're producing, is accessible, and will kind of slide in seamlessly to any of the different readers that we might have. And so using styles helps with that massively. Table of contents I've already mentioned, and the professional standards, just fitting in the norms. And so I mentioned APA or referencing styles, but also like your place of employment might have a particular style, right? You want to have kind of a consistent brand across. And so they might expect all of their employees to use things in this particular font or this particular font size. And so instead of having to go through and do it all individually, piece by piece yourself, styles will just do the work for you. And so you might want to open Word and Google Docs now to kind of walk through the steps of finding this yourself, just to make sure that you see where it is. But so the styles panel, home styles panel, it's the ribbon up at the top on Word. And so you can select your text and then apply one of those headings. I would say just select some text and try all the different headings so you can see how they all work. You can change the defaults as well. So if you like the size of one of the headings, but you don't like the font, you can go in and change the font that is the default for that heading. So say I want heading 1 to be in Times, but I want heading 2 to be in Cambria. They're both in Times automatically. I can keep heading 1 as it is, but go to 2 and then modify it to have it in Cambria, and it will apply consistently all of the times that I use heading 2 now. So you can also change things like the color, the spacing, all of that. And when you select that, you can have it automatically update. So you can commit to one style throughout, and then at the end be like, actually, no, I want it to be this way instead. And you can make that change, and it takes seconds, whereas going through manually would take significantly longer. And so this is for Google Docs. I already showed you a screenshot of how to find it, but it's format and then paragraph styles, and then you can see all the different headings or titles. Same sort of thing, you can modify it as you like. And with Google Docs, it can be a little bit more finicky in my experience when it's applying, but usually it will do what it needs to do. Just kind of be aware of that. So when you're formatting things manually, you can come up with lots of issues, but sometimes when you're starting to get used to applying all of these different tools that are housed within Word or Docs, it might not come naturally right away. And so you can sometimes come up against some issues that you need to work on correcting. So just these are some example problems that one might have just when using a word processor. So if your headings, you decide they're in the wrong size or the wrong color, or maybe you get an assignment that's like really particular, you have a really particular professor and they want everything to be in this certain font. You've already written your paper before you remembered they wanted it in that font. If you have it in styles, you can just go through and make all of the changes, the sizing, the bolding, whatever it is, automatically. Table of contents. You can manually make a table of contents if you want. I don't know why you would want to, but you could do it. But then you'd have to go in, and every time you wrote a new paper or a new paragraph, you would have to change it because the page numbers wouldn't be consistent anymore, right? Where if you're using your headings, the table of contents is automatically going to read wherever that heading has been pushed down. So you write 5 more pages, it will automatically update and show that it's 5 pages later. Sometimes you can start using the headings and then forget to label one, and so it doesn't show up in the table of contents. Those are sorts of like the tricky things where maybe if you're like working on something that's longer, like a 20-page paper or 30-page if you're doing a dissertation, those can be little things that will really throw you off and just add to that kind of frustration that can sometimes be inherent in this process in general. So if you get in the habit now of using those headings, it's going to be less likely to be an issue for you later, because you're going to automatically, okay, I have this new section heading, I'm going to apply this style here. So it will automatically sync in with your table of contents. Um, and then sometimes there's tricky things like your heading being on the same line as your paragraph is starting. And, sometimes you'll like use spaces or tabs or whatever. If you just use a paragraph break instead, that'll change it. And you apply the right style to your actual body text. So just some like random examples of things that might go wrong, where when you're getting used to using styles regularly, and there's a lot more that comes into this that we're going to go through in the rest of this module, once those things kind of become second nature to you, these are going to be problems that you're probably not going to encounter anymore, at least not as regularly. And so I already mentioned kind of the differences where Word's more sophisticated than Google Docs, but some of the other things that kind of come up, I would say, is the table of contents management, particularly when you have a longer document. Like if I think back to writing my dissertation, I would have never done that in Google Docs. I cannot imagine Google Docs keeping up with all of that. It was hundreds of pages. Word struggled with it sometimes, but in trying to, I think my table of contents was probably 3 pages long. And so updating that, Word was just so much better at kind of keeping a handle on it, essentially. And so I had several different styles that were applied through that. I had several layers of headings that would show up. I think I went 4 or 5 deep. And the table of contents in Word just was always able to refresh that very quickly, where Google Docs, it might have been able to, but in my experience, it starts to crash when you have more than a couple items in a table of contents. And then in terms of just like layout, the more complex pieces, Word tends to handle that better. But Google Docs is simpler. And so sometimes that's actually better. Sometimes you don't need all of that extra. Sometimes it's just a really basic thing where you're going to have a 2-page document, but you want to have some headings, you want to have a title, you want to have the body text formatted in this particular way. And so the convenience also of having the cloud there always. And then within Docs, you can track back previous versions. And so sometimes that can be really nice if you try something maybe new or different with your styles, but actually you end up hating it. Instead of having to undo everything constantly, you can just go to your previous version and kind of take off from there again. So both good. Word is better for more complex documents. We're not going to get into it quite yet, but sometimes when you're adding in figures or other images, those can get a little bit clunky when you're trying to do it on Google Docs. Yeah. So key takeaways, styles, I say they aren't optional. They shouldn't be optional. They should be something that you can commit to. And they really just make everything seem more polished. And so I've spoken earlier about kind of the importance of presenting this professional face, really, when you're using files and documents and things. And so this is just another kind of layer to that. So maybe you don't feel it's as important in your schoolwork right now, but when you're in your career, some of you are already in your careers, just having that kind of knowledge to be able to pull on right away, having it be the default, and then just making pretty documents. Like there's something for the value of things being visually pleasant to look at. And so having a nice table of contents, having bolded or italics or whatever for all of your different layers of your headings, it's just nice. It makes the document a little bit easier to take in. And it also helps you kind of guide the way that the reader is going to engage with your document, because they know, okay, this is important because of this. This is the highlight of what I'm taking out of it based on how you're kind of signifying things through your headings. So you should get used to using it because it really does present that professional front. And really, it just makes it a lot easier for you to have a finished, complete document. You're not going to have to take the time to do a lot of the extra cleanup work or the editing work at the end, because it's just already going to be done, because you're integrating so well with the styles that already exist within the programs that you're using. So I would say play around with this in both Word and Docs. Your assignment for this week is going to have you do that as well. But just for personal preference, I would say start kind of paying attention to it maybe more than you do now, if you're not already somebody who's really committed to using styles regularly. Hopefully, all that makes sense. You will be applying it soon, so if it doesn't now, it will by the end of this module.